topic is, in infrastructure, we have a lot of people who are developers and a lot of people who are system administrators, some people who are both. And it takes a lot of effort for us to get along because there's different priorities that each of us have. So this is a general talk about how do we get along, how do we not get along, where do we fail, how can we get better, what are your experiences with working in similar environments, different things like that. So we'll each take just a tiny bit of time to introduce ourselves, our general role in infrastructure, and then questions, or we'll just start spitting out topics and talking about random stuff. So I'm Toshio Kuritomi. I'm mostly a developer in Fedora infrastructure, and once in a while I just kind of help out with some administration stuff where they can just tell me type this, tell me what it says.
I'm Matt Domsch. I work at Dell in our office of the CTO doing technology strategy. When I'm not doing work that I get paid for, I'm probably late at night working on Fedora infrastructure stuff. I wrote the Mirror Manager application that keeps track of all of our mirrors and feeds you all your updates, and manage that as deployed in the infrastructure environment.
I'm John Palmieri. I work in infrastructure on Fedora Community and some Moksha stuff. And now I am working to implement messaging over our infrastructure.
I'm Seth et al. I work on Yum, and whenever something breaks that's related to Fedora people, or sometimes the torrent, or postfix, or thanks, or something that I may have had lots of experience with at one other point in time, and I get suckered into it. So,
I'm Mike McGrath. I'm the infrastructure team lead. So, like a year ago when shit hit the fan, it got all over me. So that's my role. I play developer sometimes. I wrote Smoke, and I actually had a dream about this event, but it was in a Joss Whedon style musical. Please, it was awesome. We'll find it was video awesome. Cameras. Tell us you rehearsed.
I'm feeling green. It's a green day.
He's very good.
I'm wearing blue.
Who are you? What do you do?
I'm Steven Smoochin. I don't do much except heckle the crowd. I cry like a clown. Okay, we're kind of whole angel. I'm basically Mike's pimply-faced old guy. When Seth's not around to be heckled by Mike for being the old guy, I'm the old guy? Well, you were the old guy. Now I'm the old guy.
No, you guys are both sysadmins. You're supposed to be on the same team.
No. I'll be the old guy.
Have you ever read the DORH files?
I'm not 34.
You guys get along?
Oh, Duke
33.
Duke aged you.
I'm older than Seth.
Okay, then you look like you're 24.
I know, I'm going to look like that for another 3 years.
His wife is very lucky.
And now you're going to say you're 52.
My name's Luke Mackin. I'm the young guy. I'm a developer, and I work on a lot of different corners of Fedora. In terms of infrastructure, I wrote Bodhi, the Fedora update system that developers use to push out updates to the world. I also helped work on Fedora Community, developer dashboard, and I play sysadmin every now and then because I deploy and maintain the apps I write. I also help work on SE Linux deployment in our infrastructure and other security things. And yeah.
Okay. All right. So, any questions to start us off, or should I throw something out there? Remy.
Particularly because I don't have that much tape left, and because I have to talk about it in a class at RIT. Really quickly, you guys don't have to go into it too much, but one of the topics that we're going to be talking about is just the FOSS process. You know, how do you guys go about creating free and open source software, generally speaking?
We're a good group to talk to because while a lot of people have adopted like a free environment, we have really embraced it, especially with our infrastructure. We don't have our public configs available yet, but we're planning on it.
Mm-hmm.
We've certainly shared them several times. We have a free software-only rule, so anybody can duplicate our system for free.
Including us on demand.
Including us on demand. And really, I think that the way we do the process works pretty well because when we develop code, we try to start in the open, but we make a lot of mistakes that
Are in the open.
that are in the open too, and we learn from it. I think everybody at these tables here, when put under a public scope, will rise to the occasion. Whereas I've worked in the past with some people put under that scope would get very defensive and angry about things. We all take criticism seriously, but not too seriously, and we find a good balance. I mean, I can't think of anything that has gone in or not gone in because we're all butting heads and yelling about it. I mean, there's nothing deployed right now that I can think of that is something that we desperately hate that it's there. But I mean, but at the end of the day, like for me, the goal in the entire FOSS process is that it needs to suit the end users. So, well, there's a lot of talk about moving from CVS to Git, and even Luke is working on rewriting Bodhi. My job in that whole task is kind of to just make sure that we are still getting bits in and getting bits out. And so whether or not we use CVS or not, that doesn't matter to me as much as we have a process and that it's working. And because that process is in the open, it allows anybody and everybody to come in and look at it from end to end. And you can say, anybody could come in and say, I hate CVS and we should be changing it. And they can go in and do that. And that's an amazingly large task. But that's what's so amazing about it is, I mean, really anybody could do it. And they could, and I think Jesse will be doing that. So that's my take on our FOSS process.
Sure.
Just open from beginning to end.
Matt, you and Luke both have created software for Fedora that's become more general and been adopted elsewhere. Do either of you want to talk about it too?
So Mirror Manager's got at least one, finally, other use. The RPM Fusion team adopted it, mainly because Fedora had already been using it. There have been several other projects that have approached me and have investigated doing so. One of the mistakes I made with developing Mirror Manager in Fedora is there's a bunch of Fedora isms built into the code. I didn't realize quite how many there were until someone else tried to adopt it for a completely different project. And in the process, started sending me patches, which was great, I loved that, saying here, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and here's the patch to fix it. And in only a couple of cases, I even have to massage those patches to make them suit what I wanted. That's been a lot of fun in taking an open source project that was really suited for one project and watching it sprout into other corners that I hadn't realized even existed.
And having been the Mirror Manager from a long, long, long ago, the amount of how wonderful of having somebody actually outside of Red Hat doing it and being able to be open about it when there's a lot of conflicts at times. It's allowed a lot of people to come in and say, well, I just want to run it for this, but here's this. And I think it's worked really, really well for the whole.
Yeah, well, the creation of private mirrors, I think, has been a real empowering capability. It wasn't something we really had before. If you had a private mirror, you had to go and edit all your config files. Now you set up your mirror, you set it up in Mirror Manager, your clients just put in their Fedora CD and it just works. That wasn't something that we could have done in the previous world of manual list creation and a centralized command and control structure for the mirrors.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know it, because it just works for you, Mirror Manager is by far the most feature-rich and useful mirror management system in the distribution universe. I mean, by far.
Speaking as somebody who actually deals with practically every distribution on the planet, Mirror Manager is the best system that is out there. Nobody else can even touch it. I mean, and this is a testament to Matt, because when I need to change something, I just go and I muck with it in Mirror Manager, and then I ask Matt if I did it right, and he goes, probably. As opposed to something like, and I don't want to bash on CentOS or anything, but you send a mail to the mailing list, and when they get around to it, they make the changes. It's a very different process, and much more empowering to the Mirror admin in this situation. And yeah.
And in other software, Luke's got Nurture, which is being used all over.
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits of writing software in Fedora infrastructure is, you know, we have a very custom hybrid environment, but so do most companies. And what we do is we solve problems for ourselves, meaning for sysadmins and for developers, and we throw it out there and we use it and we get developers using it. So we're solving pretty hard problems that a lot of people need solved, and we're getting communities of people to test the code. So, you know, we have a lot of great projects that we develop ourselves that are being used. And, you know, Bodhi, for example, it solves problems for other companies and they've looked into using it. And similar to what Matt said, you know, I wrote it based on requirements from developers, and it's very Fedora specific, and, you know, but I've learned that it's where these dark corners are when people take it and try and use it in their own environment. But, you know, we iterate over and over, and we make things more generic and usable, and it produces really good code.
Next question. All right, no one has a question. What are some of the conflicts that we've had in infrastructure over things like
Mod Python versus WSGI.
Okay, Mod Python versus WSGI.
Well, that was like
the
technical conflicts.
Yeah,
It
but
was.
it's
technical.
It's valid though.
That counts.
But it's valid. So what was kind of the background of that is we had some things running under Mod Python because we do a lot of development in Python, and then we generated some new apps, and instead of using Mod Python for these new apps, we wanted to use Mod Whiskey. But Mod Whiskey and Mod Python won't exist in the same Apache process together. So we had a conflict here of new code that we were writing, needing something that
We didn't even have it installed in the same system.
Yeah,
Correct.
and to make this better known, we have a set of app servers, and we tend to just scale them out as we need more hits. So on app 1, app 2, app 3, you have all the exact same stuff installed. It's Bodhi, package database, Smol, the wiki, Mirror Manager, probably a small handful of other stuff that is all running on all exactly the same servers. So when we have committed to Mod Python, only to find out that, I mean, that, you know, for better or worse, that was a mistake. Not that Whiskey was much of an option at the same time.
Yeah, it wasn't available.
It wasn't
Mod
available.
didn't exist yet.
But at the same, but we had to start moving to it because Mod Python had really bad memory issues. We were running into problems with our architecture then because things like a long-running Mirror Manager process might fill up memory that would then take out a Bodhi instance, and that type of thing is a real problem that has to be mitigated. And Whiskey took care of all of it. It cheats because it just doesn't have long-standing processes. That's kind of how it frees the memory up regularly. But we got better speed out of it. We relied heavily on Turbo Gears, which integrates pretty seamlessly with it. And so that was an easy fix.
On the note of Turbo Gears, I believe Fedora was probably one of the first, probably maybe one of the largest adopters of Turbo Gears. We started using it before it was really mainstream, and we got to experiment with it early on, and you know, it's paid off. We're using it all over the place.
Yeah. If you look at the number of apps that we have compared to the number of developers we have and the amount of time we've had to develop them, I mean, it really is pretty amazing, especially with a lot of those are really high quality apps. Like Mirror Manager is a perfect example where we.
No, the least quality part of Mirror Manager is the Turbo Gears have.
Well, but still, it's out and it works.
But the Turbo Gears is a good example of a problem area.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem area within that is, great, Turbo Gears is a horribly moving target, at least for anything new that's being developed.
Yep.
And it had been for, what, a year and a half at this point? Almost
Well,
two?
Turbo Gears, here's where, this is one thing, and this is an interesting conflict that we kind of brought on ourselves. You know, in Fedora, the project, not just us, we tend to be early adopters, and we get pretty far just on our talent. We make a lot of mistakes, but we have smart people that are here that can fix them, mitigate them, do whatever, and then the mistakes go away very quickly. And in Fedora infrastructure, I think this has been, really the core conflict is the difference between early adoption software, which is something that we tend to shy towards, and mitigating all the risks that come with that. And the risks that come with adopting new software are, will it disappear? I mean, when we started using Turbo Gears, it was kind of a new project, and there were fears at the time that it would just up and vanish.
And some of the pieces of Turbo Gears have vanished. I mean, like Mirror Manager, you're still using SQL object, but
Which is
really
deprecated.
that's unmaintained.
It's done.
It's
It's one of those
But we
pieces of
still
software
have
that's
to
done.
keep
Right.
using it
And
and
it's-
maintaining it in Fedora infrastructure
Yeah.
because we still
Because
have
I
apps
still
that are
do.
using it.
Exactly.
We
and
haven't
it's-
ported away yet.
But
And it's-
TurboGear's community is
Whereas
set on
they're working on
maintaining
it.
too.
But and that's a
Well, I mean,
mildly painful
the
conversion.
Unicode
but-
problems on Rail,
not
they
difficult.
can't get rid of them.
But I mean, that's a good example. And SQL Object didn't go away because the developer stopped caring about it or because upstream gave up. It's because a better alternative came its way. And in TurboGears in particular, it's more of a framework that grabs best of breed stuff, and best of breed stuff is changing over time. So I think Seth's main concern is probably the most valid in that TurboGears 1 is still out and being used. They have changed a couple things in TurboGears 1. I think most people consider TurboGears 1 to be Alchemy at this point. I would think most people coming in would do Alchemy. Is that what the doc's directing to?
Well, I mean,
1.1.
right now, if you go and want to download 1.0.9, it will probably default to SQL Object.
But 1.1 is the latest 1x tree.
Yeah, they
and I'm
changed
sure
the
it's
defaults.
Alchemy. But then you've got TurboGears 2, which is drastically different in a lot of ways. Uses a lot of completely different technologies. And having just written my first TurboGears 2 app, I can say it's remarkably similar to the first one, but it's not like suddenly all of our TurboGears 1 apps are now TurboGears 2. And when we look into things like Moksha and Fedora Community, which are using a lot of really brand new technologies, most of which none of us have used except for Luke and J5, and now Seth.
A little bit.
Only a little bit. When that stuff gets integrated, my job as a sysadmin is I have to learn it, regardless, because I've got to support it and I've got to troubleshoot it. But two, I've got those same concerns that I had with TurboGears 1. Will they stick around? How much of a moving target is this? What you don't want to get into is that point in time where Mirror Manager is pretty close to that, and some of our other apps are getting pretty close to that, where they're still relying on a core technology, SQL Object, that is deprecated and soon will be no longer supported, I would assume, at all, and probably have security issues with them. And at that point in time, that's a real tough spot to be in.
In fact, parts of the TG1 stack are no longer supported upstream. Cherry Pie 2,
Rule dispatch.
Rule
or,
Dispatch, yeah, those are under the hood things that we rely on. They haven't broken yet, but if they do break in a major way, we're going to have to figure out how to fix them because no one else is
There's
there.
another aspect to it is that it seems like every time the stack iterates, they add an abstraction layer. So there's one more on top of. So for example, you start at TurboGears 2, and you move up into Moksha, and you move up into Fedora Community. And by the time you're trying to figure out what broke, you're 3 stacks above. So if you've got something that broke at the SQL Alchemy layer, good luck, because you've got to find it. And especially if you're not familiar with it already, it means either chasing down the developer, which is great provided it's in the middle of the week, but it's not so great when it's Saturday at 2 o'clock in the morning, which is when things break, that's when it matters. And so that's the question mark is, as things develop and as developers like moving quickly onto the new projects that become available, it's trying to make sure that if those things are deployed, and even if they're not deployed as production, but they're deployed in such a way that people are using them, you've got to be sure that those things can be troubleshot by folks who are going to get the page when it falls over. And
That's a good point.
that's the hard part with it, is because anybody who is tangentially following any of the tools that are developed would have a hard time knowing what to prob necessarily in order to fix the bug, or even find out how to fix the bug, especially because, and this is not a negative, this is a positive from the development standpoint, the rate at which you're developing new and interesting code means that the standby for most sysadmins of this just broke, how do I fix it, we can't use. You can't use Google to solve your problems.
Yeah.
You can't search to solve the problem to get away, because
When
chances are the docs are in the code and that's all you got.
With the bugs I'm running into are the #1 hit on Google for any particular search,
Then you're in trouble.
then I'm in trouble.
I hate searching for something I'm trying to solve and seeing my question to the list.
So we're adopting these technologies really, really early on, but we're doing it in a way that, Toshio and I are TurboGears developers. We've kind of become one. I've hacked on various corners, and we're heavily involved with the projects that we're adopting early on. Like if TurboGears was a black box to us, I would not be switching to 2 and all this stuff.
Well, it's a black box to me, but that's why I've got you guys.
Right, exactly. And you guys know that you can come to us with TurboGears problems because we exist upstream as well.
Good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, how do you deal with, sorry, it's kind of a big question, so just give me a minute to ramble, like assignment of work issues. Like how do you decide what you're going to work on? Who's going to work on what? How do you deal with sort of border issues? And also, how do you deal with the single development problem? Say if Matt was to win the lottery and retire to Hawaii tomorrow and never enter a line of code,
Yeah.
what happens to
We would first all wish Matt well.
We just
win the lottery
And then we
exam?
would all
Why
ask
tell us?
Matt, we would all ask Matt for a loan. And then go, I'm sorry.
Well, you know, it's kind of a funny problem because we've kind of solved it pretty well. In most environments where I've been, there's a very clear delineation between the teams. And in our environment here, we have responsibility delineated fairly well. Luke knows he's responsible for Bodhi, and when there's an issue with Bodhi, you know, we go to Luke. But if I were to fix Bodhi and submit a patch, that would not be at all out of line for me to do. People know that, you know, typically I'm one of the go-to guys for the websites, and even though Luke's a developer, if he ended up on one of our web servers trying to, you know, restart Mirror Manager because it busted for some reason, that would not be at all out of line for him to do. And so we have, you know, we have clear responsibility lines drawn for who absolutely needs to get the work done, but at the same time, you know, we try to help each other out when we can. I always try to get a very good sense of what the bug, you know, a bug report of what a bug is when I send it to Koji or someplace else. And I think that is how we kind of decide what work we work on. As far as the details of that, I mean, I'm in the same boat as Matt. When I use, you know, what you said, the dispatcher was something that got upgraded? The rule dispatcher? I have no idea what that is. They do. But, and you know, I've now written, or at least helped write two TurboGears apps and another TG2 app. And I feel very comfortable in them, but I have no idea what the rule dispatcher is. But we've got at least 2 guys on staff that do. We're pretty good. I mean, I guess we still have a TG2 authentication thing to figure out, don't we? But I mean, we're gonna need our own plugin. That's fun. But but I mean, that's kind of how we divide the work up.
We get to set up a Kerberos server.
What's that?
Is it a culture thing or a policy thing?
This is a culture thing, and
It's just that's how you guys.
I've worked a little bit in trying to do that, but most of it fostered itself. But we do have the single developer issue. Now we've got Toshio and Luke are basically full-time Fedora developers. We've got Matt, who's a volunteer developer, and he writes Mirror Manager.
And just so we're clear, the FUD bus is an extraordinarily bad idea to have all of them on it.
Yeah, tricky. But,
Just saying.
But with, like
No.
if Matt were to stop developing Mirror Manager for whatever reason, we'd pick it up. We're familiar with the framework.
Right.
I would bet that at my level, I'd probably be able to work comfortably on it within a week if I absolutely had to.
So that's the case for most of your projects. There's someone else who's
Yeah.
familiar enough to.
There
Yeah.
are
Because the reason I
problems,
asked is
though.
we had a similar, you know, we had that problem in one of the projects I work on. We had this cool tool that someone wrote, and then someone doesn't show up into meetings anymore, and now we have tool in half-finished state and
Well, there are
nothing to do
problems.
with it.
Yeah.
For instance, there was Amber. Amber was supposed to be our package browser, our end-user package browser that people could go and they could look at and they could say, oh, I want a web browser, but I don't want Firefox. What else is out there, or how have people rated it, what comments are there, you know, and do more end-usery things rather than just like building packages in SRPMs and stuff like that. Well, there was one developer who was working on it, and I talked to him extensively because I'm in charge of the more, you know, SRPM level stuff and the web interface for that. And we kind of designed it together a little bit, but he was the person who was doing it, and he left. You know, he left Fedora, and the code died. Period.
Yeah.
It was gone.
So
I mean, the code is there, but there's no developer, there's no interest. It didn't get done. But
And
it
I
was,
would
it was an
argue
interesting concept. And so, you know, this is a couple of years later now, and they wanted to get stuff into Fedora community that does stuff, and I wanted to get stuff into the SRPM level that did stuff like that. So when someone else, as a summer of code this year, said, oh, I want to kind of work on that stuff, I said, that's great, but you're not going to do it on the old code base in some external tool. You're going to come and you're going to either work with Fedora community or you're going to work with me on the package database, and we're going to put that data in there, because those are things that we're relying on now. And if you go away, which, you know, a summer of code student is very common that they'll go away, that code lives in something that we care about and that we're gonna keep maintaining.
And in our environment in particular, we're pretty unique because, and this is part luck and part policy, we have really embraced Python as our development code. Every single person at this table at least knows a little bit of Python. And
Print hello.
What's that? Yes, he can print hello.
Enough to be dangerous
That won't
and
compile on free.
And the thing that
parentheses, hello,
yeah,
hello.
you got a parenthesis, yeah. But and in addition to that, we kind of just Luke started using turbo gears and we embraced it. And for the most part, everybody here also knows turbo gears. So in that respect, we are unique to other environments where they have several different developers working in several different languages, and there is no economies of
Now,
scale.
there is a negative to that side, is that when someone presents a Ruby app, the amount of resistance they get,
Because you know
it's a real hard answer.
Although Ruby does not have as much resistance as if somebody says Java. Right?
Yeah.
We hate Java, but we do run Ruby apps and we do run PHP apps.
The only Ruby app I can think we run is Puppet.
That's a PHP
Ruby
app.
Yeah, and I think
we've got a PHP app.
We got several MediaWiki's PHP.
MediaWiki.
We don't write it, but we.
We didn't write it.
We didn't write it.
Yeah, but we do a lot of research whenever we do something that we don't have a lot of talent in. So like for PHP, we have a couple, you know, volunteers who are good with PHP. And they can't be with us full time, but they can be with us sometimes, and then we take a look. So like MediaWiki was a decision based on.
Yeah, and we don't aim to write stuff. I very fervently resist us writing something ourselves if I think that it exists out there, because I mean there's this one, and that's kind of a core problem with. I mean, sysadmins do this too, but developers do it too. Doctors do it, plumbers do it. I mean,
birds and bees do it.
Birds and bees do it. You get bird bees. And when a developer is looking at a problem, they want to develop their way out of that problem.
Right.
When if you go to the hospital with a sore thumb, the doctor or your wife's pregnant, whatever, the doctor's going to want to do something. Right. Something is wrong with you. Your wife is pregnant. I'm going to do something. And that's what they do. Like I don't like doctors. I'm not hiding that at all.
I'd like to come from more of a developer standpoint on that issue. That if you are too rigid and more of a designer point of that issue actually, if you're too rigid, what happens is you can only see with what you got. You can't see the future. You can only see what can I do with what tools I have right now. And sometimes limiting yourself is actually good for creativity, but if you're only working, like we stuck with just Turbo Gears 1 and just did that, you would do things sort of, even the Turbo Gears 1, people realized after developing Turbo Gears 1 that we got sort of the idea of what we were designing for, but we didn't actually hit the mark, which is why they went back and did Turbo Gears 2. And other people, they reused a lot of components that were existing, but those components were existing because people were trying to solve the same problem or similar problems, and the best of breeds came out of that.
So
That's true, but there is, well, maybe Seth can put it
I
better.
guess what I'm going to say here is that that's great, and it's wonderful if your task as a developer is solely and only I produce this version of code and it works and then I walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you wanna really expand your creativity as a developer, tell yourself that I have to stick by this code for the next 5 years and I have no choice in the matter, and I will be gunned down by someone if I try to walk away from it. Now, if you do that,
He wrote Yum.
See, speaking of being gunned down by someone,
Yum was only supposed to last one version.
you're right. That's true. The idea behind Yum was Jeremy was going to take care of it all. Jeremy Katz swore to me, well, yeah, but I'm working on this thing, and then the next iteration, the problem's going to go away. It's going to be solved. Do y'all remember Pirate? Anyway, so there was supposed to be more to it. Anyway, so long story short, there was, the idea was the task was supposed to be short to begin with, but the trouble is that after the tarball is released of whatever program that someone is working on, that's not enough, especially for web apps. It's never going to be enough.
Maintenance costs are always huge.
Right. And the maintenance cost is what's going on. So in the best of all possible worlds, there would never be a Turbo Gears 2. And I don't mean in terms of I don't mean that the technologies wouldn't develop. I mean that it would be TurboGears 1, and then 1.1 would add features, and then 1.2 would add some more features, and 1.3 would add some more features, but they'd still support 1 and 1.1 and 1.2 the whole way. And only when you got to 2 would you break API stride, but you wouldn't get to 2 for several years. So you're maintaining the API the whole way, so that someone who wrote an app on 1 doesn't break.
One thing I would add to that though is that I think my sense is, and I'll defer to Luke and Tosha if they want to correct me on this, is that version 1 of TurboGears was more of a, it could have been more compared to a beta when you compare it to TurboGears 2, because my understanding is they're really trying hard to stick with TurboGears 2 for several years at this point. Is that,
Well,
I mean, have they started planning TurboGears 3?
Hold on, I wouldn't call 1 a beta at all. 1 is built of what was the best stuff out there at the time. SQL Object was the best ORM at the time.
But I mean, it's
Well,
been
no.
deprecated after 2
So-
years.
So that's not really the way, so TurboGears 1 really was a beta, depending on how you look at it. TurboGears 1 was stable, and it had reasonably good components, but SQL Alchemy had come out before TurboGears 1 was released, and there was an internal debate about, do we release 1.0 because we have something that works now, it works really well, we are all using it for stuff, or do we try and pull in this new ORM, SQL Alchemy, take all of our tools that we've grown to love, and port them over to this new framework, get it all to work with that new framework before we release 1.0. And they decided we're going to go with the old stuff, which if SQL Object and CherryPy 2 had continued development, and rules dispatch, all these different things were still continuing to develop, and today we would still have them as stable, suitable upstreams, it would have been a good decision because we would now have a TurboGears 1 line that was very stable, very good, whatever.
But that doesn't mean
it
TG2
didn't.
wouldn't exist because WSGI.
Well, but TurboGears 1 will run on WSGI. It's not great,
Not it'll work.
but see, we need when ideally we'd be able to keep running TurboGears 1 for 5 to 7 years before we have to decide that we're going to write a new app, port or whatever.
But you should
Yeah,
never,
we can't-
rely on a 1.0, like, if,
Right. So,
the
here's
thing
the
is,
thing:
they've
we
learned
should-
their mistakes in 2.0, and
if we
I'm
should
pretty
never
sure.
rely on a 1.0,
Yeah.
we should not have built any of our apps
That's
on
right.
TurboGears 1.
What I'm saying is you shouldn't rely on.
But we needed those
yeah.
apps. So it was a.
You
So
have-
this is a problem that we have, and we've got to try and
So
figure it out.
another good way of looking at this is, so Rel 5 is a little long in the tooth at this point. I think everyone can admit that. And Rel 6 is eventual whenever that's happening, and it doesn't really matter when the whenever is. But let's say Rel 6, which should be supported for 7 years, is that the number at the current time? Ships with TurboGears 2. Are you ready? Now, just to put it in perspective, let's say that Rel 6 ships tomorrow, which I don't think that's the case, but let's say it ships tomorrow, okay?
On a
Are you ready
Sunday.
for 2000, that's right, on a Sunday. Are you ready for 2016 TurboGears 2 apps still being what you have to maintain?
But I think you're trying to put stuff that, you're trying to put the same sort of box on something that was like a new technology. On something, so if we thought that way, we would have used Perl, right? We would have gone and just, we know it works, we know whatever.
Nobody would have picked up Python.
Nobody would have picked up Python. And so you have to balance between, you have to say, I know we're gonna have headaches here, I know, and that's what we've done. I know we're gonna have headaches here, I know there's gonna be issues, but they'll eventually, we'll make those mistakes and we'll work it out, and the benefits are worth moving
Right.
to that.
And that's
then
true if
that's-
and only if you start, that's
Yeah.
true, it's an absolutely true statement. Provided you get the same experience you had with Python and with Perl that do occur. So for example, if you're revving every 6 months, so that you're breaking API with your past every 6 months, then you're never going to let your users catch up. And for example, early versions of Perl, early versions of Python did just that. Released early, released often. And then what has happened? They've all done the exact same thing, which is, now we're not gonna do that. It's not a good idea to release
How many
early,
years
release
does it take them to get to that?
in most cases, it took as short a time as a year before they started saying, we have to maintain compatibility.
I think if you look at the history of when they started and
Okay.
when people started to use them,
Then
you'll
look
see
at the tools that people are using elsewhere,
iceberg.
and look at the tools that folks are using that have to maintain compatibility. Look at RPM as a good example. Look at Yum as another example. We are stuck with 3.x compatibility for pretty much ever at this point because we have plugins coming out out the wazoo.
And
So-
it's specified in LSB.
Right, the LSB, right. So the point is that we're stuck on a certain versions of things and can't move beyond them. Now, I say you're stuck
because from a development standpoint, there are huge sections of code that I would like to see never occur. In fact, I wouldn't mind eviscerating them from my own memory. But the point is that that you have to maintain those, and you have to be prepared to maintain those for such a long period of time. And while the rapid development makes a great amount of sense, the trouble we get into is it's a rapid development to a release. By the time the release is adopted by users, everything there is obsolete.
And
That's the exact reason we don't run Fedora on the infrastructure servers.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we do when we need it,
Right?
and if there's not a need, I mean, the
Yeah,
latest
because-
CVS is not that great compared, it's not that much better than the last CVS it was. So the CVS box is a clear RHEL 5 and stuff. We're not getting much out of the latest CVS.
And it's, the thing here though is it is as you're seeing, it is a constant, I don't wanna use the word battle,
It's a
although
battle.
with
It's a
Seth and J5 there.
It's
about
risk,
pulling up the-
it's risk identification.
It's risk
mitigation.
identification and then putting two people in the room with a brick and one walks out.
And I was talking to Toshi about this just 2 days ago. I was like, yes. He was like, so why don't you like running newest Bling? I'm like, because I have to fix it at 3 o'clock in the morning. And
The longer Bling has been around, the more likely I can find it on Google.
Right.
I think that one of the things that I think that the problem that Seth identified is a very good one. And if we step back and look at the global view of things, I think that there's kind of a natural tendency for projects in themselves, because we have TurboGear's developers, but I think the project itself is realizing that they did need to release early and release often, and now that they're established, they need to stagger that out. And I think if you look at when TurboGears 1 and Jigdo and some of the other Python frameworks really started to establish themselves, was in itself an interesting time for Python, because Python had been in use for a long time, but we never really saw the sort of, I'll call it a Python helper. We never really saw the frameworks in Python really being used and built until around that time. I'll give it a 2 to 3 year span when Jigdo and TurboGears 1 and stuff. So I think that
Django.
Django, what did I say?
Jigdo, it's very different.
It's all the same to me. I don't like either of them. But I think that if you look at the Python world during that time, there was a lot of looking around to kind of see how we do this. And
Python was trying to find a way to